And I think you just got to look for those things in life, haven't you? You know, I wouldn't want to be writing about the same. I wouldn't want to have the same impetuses that I had in the 1990s. I like that I'm writing about different things, and it's still about love and passion and all of those things if you boil it down, but it comes from a slightly different place.
Hi, I'm Andrew Trendle. You're watching NME, and we're here with Matt and Brett from Suede.
Hello, Andrew.
How are you doing, guys?
Very well. How are you?
Good. It's nice to be out again, isn't it?
Yeah, in a dark basement. Yeah, that's great.
Welcome to The Social. Thank you very much to The Social for having us. Have you guys been here before?
You.
No.
Never? Oh, wow. I'd recommend it.
No, I have. I used to come here a bit in the 90s, I think, when it first started, when they used to have kind of club nights down here. I've been to a few book things here as well. It seems to have aged quite gently, The Social. Every time I come down there, there's people reading and stuff. So.
Knitting.
Yeah, knitting.
I mean, what are some of your central London haunts? I mean, what does a good Suede London night out have in store?
Oh, I don't do nights out anymore. I do days out. So places like the Wallace Collection, that's my favourite place in central London, just around the corner. It's a sort of, I don't know if you know it, it's like an old museum, but it's one of those museums that no one ever goes to. And there's a kind of nice little cafe there, so you just get kind of like rich kind of widows sitting, eating their kind of Battenberg cake. It's quite charming and lovely.
Oh, wow, that sounds lovely.
So my little boy, he likes kind of suits, knights in armour and stuff like that, so there's lots of suits of armour. So not nights out anymore. Days out.
All of the places that we used to go have all been knocked down, actually. It's like it's a kind of weird kiss of death, isn't it? Like every
studio we've ever worked.
Every studio we've ever recorded in, almost all the gigs that we played in our first kind of 4 or 5, they're all kind of
If we
luxury
played there,
flats
it's
now.
been demolished, basically. Yeah.
There's basically a wrecking ball following behind us. Going, right, that's it. Get rid of it.
Most people that we've worked with as well.
Yeah.
Well, he retired. He retired. Shit.
Double your fee and take a sledgehammer with you next time.
Exactly. As we finish.
Yeah.
Good night.
Like one of those stress relieving things, you know what I mean, when you smash a wall up like that.
Well, the last time we spoke was just before the release of The Blue Hour.
Yeah.
How have you been? Anything happened since 2018?
Made a record, made a new record. That's what's been happening really.
That's basically all we've done. Yeah, it's been quite good actually. I mean, The Blue Hour was kind of a very it's quite an out there record for us. I think for most people, and we had this idea that we'd do like a live album, really old fashioned live album, get fans down to watch us recording it. Have it like half gig and half kind of recording session. And try and capture that feeling of a Suede gig. And then everything happened and you couldn't see anyone anymore. So we had to we still wanted to make a record that felt like that. We just had to do it with just the 5 of us kind of geeing each other on rather than 10,000 people.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a really kind of have almost like a live energy feel, this record. That was the idea. There was last 2 records, Blue Hour and Night Thoughts, have been kind of quite increasingly sort of odd and left field, and we wanted to just come back with just a sort of primal kind of howl of a record sort of thing,
Well, I remember reading that you guys contemplated like becoming a fake band with fake names, and do you remember these fake names?
I think that was an interesting idea, because I think it kind of, in a funny sort of way, as you get older, sometimes you need to relearn and re-remember what it's like to be a new band, and you can sort of drift away slowly, very, very, very slowly drift away from those starting points, which are really important, to remember kind of like how it all started and that kind of exciting energy. And that was just an idea to kind of try and grab some of that back, really.
I think, every now and then we've either been forced to, or we've made ourselves kind of burn everything down and start again. Coming Out was like that. Bloodsports was like that. We've done it before, and it's always, I think, it's led to a really exciting record. So this was almost, it was one of those things where we almost forced it. We were just like, okay, let's take away no orchestras, no other musicians, no kind of like digital sessions, no click tracks or anything like that. Let's just go back to, the premises in Hackney and see what happens when we write songs like that and we perform songs like that.
I think kind of like artists are often searching for a kind of naivety that they had at the start. You know, it's that whole kind of journey that Picasso had, isn't it? You know, kind of going to, you know, into naive art forms and then kind of cubism and stuff like that. You know, kind of away from representation. You know, and it's just sort of it's a search that if you're kind of around long enough, you're going to go through these journeys and want to rediscover these things for yourself. I think.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite as sort of viscerally exciting as playing rough rock music, and that's what we try to capture with this record.
For those pretend gigs, did you contemplate getting Ricky Gervais back as a manager?
I mean, poor Ricky, because it's kind of like, I think it was this tiny little sliver of kind of.
It's one of those things that's become inflated out of proportion. Isn't
You know what I mean? He had a million other things to do badly while he was badly managing Suede. So you know, it was it wouldn't have taken his particular brand of magic, I don't think.
That's interesting. So in the Suede biopic, you're only going to give him like 5 seconds.
Yeah, we're getting him into
play himself. Yeah,
we're getting him to play himself. Yeah.
Amazing.
Cameo role.
Well, I remember we were talking about the Blue Hour. You were very explicit then that was the end of the triptych.
Were we? God, that was very forward thinking of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think you've said that through that what's been called like this amazing like reunion Renaissance trilogy. It were 3 great albums, by the way, guys. That you were kind of adventuring further and further left field, and you were kind of suggesting that you knew then that the Blue Hour was as far left as you were willing to go, or
you just sort of go where it feels right, and I remember after we finished Night Thoughts, there was a discussion about where we go, and I remember thinking, no, I feel as though we can go a bit further. There's more to explore with this. We can go odder, and you know, we've got that kind of. It felt like we had the license to do that, and then you just sort of get to a point where you know, where do you want to go with this? And the pendulum, or it's a bit of a pendulum thing. You kind of like, as a rock band, there's not a million options that you have as maybe a solo artist. You know, there's much more momentum with a rock band, but there's much less maneuverability, I think. So you're kind of like confronted with this slight pendulum-like way that your work goes, and the pendulum is always at some point going to swing back to the kind of grubby, noisy, sort of punky world that we came from, I suppose. And that's what this record is. It's just, you know, we tried to do it right this time. I think, you know, listen. We play live a lot, and so in my head the songs sound different to when I hear them recorded. And when occasionally I hear them on the radio, or I kind of come across them on whatever recorded, I think, oh God, I don't remember it sounding like that. I remember it sounding much more ballsy. So I'm so used to hearing these songs live, like So Young and Mel Mickey and stuff like that. And when you're used to hearing them live, you kind of like, oh God, listen back to the recorded versions, you think, oh, wish we'd done it a bit more, you know, just with a bit more rough edges. And that's what we try to learn with this, you know, try to sort of like learn those, not mistakes, because I'm not kind of like regretting these things, you know what I mean? It's pointless pulling at that thread. But you just, if you're going to carry on making music and recording, you've got to sort of like feel as though you're sort of like going somewhere and getting it right, you know?
So would you say that I think I've read that you said you'd never felt you'd captured that live essence? Because Suede on records, there seems to be a shimmer. Yeah. And then the Suede on stage, there seems to be like something a bit spikier.
Yeah, I think you know, technically, if you want to look at them technically, I think I've always done lots of guitar overdubs in the past, and not just guitar overdubs generally. And what we tried to do much less with this record. That was one of the kind of rules we had. There were going to be, you know, hardly any overdubs. Of course, that rules kind of just inevitably get broken, sort of thing. But you need some sort of framework to pin these things on. We wanted it to be. That was the idea for doing kind of like secret gigs, wasn't it? It was almost like so Richard could kind of like learn the parts as single parts rather than as layered parts.
We wanted to. Sometimes you have to restrict yourself a little bit, and that was the idea. That it was kind of like no kind of like. Papering over stuff with more guitars. Let's just get it right the first time,
and just leave the rough edges in. That's one of the things that we kind of almost like that was the concept. If there's a kind of concept of the record, which there kind of is and there isn't. It's a sort of sonic concept. It's almost like you're entering a rehearsal room and all the kind of noise and the feedback and stuff like that is there. It's not we're not kind of like erasing that to make it kind of like more sanitized. We're kind of leaving it in. And hopefully it sort of feels like you're actually kind of in the room with us, you know, that's the idea. You know?
I mean, it's been great playing with, you know, couple of the tracks from this, because with the Blue Hour, it's like we finished it, then we went in to rehearse, and you're kind of sitting there going, right, okay, so on this one, on the record, it's the Prague International Orchestra, some found sounds from kind of like Walking the Fields, and bird song. And there's a five of us.
And a 6-year-old boy talking about something.
What's the chord?
No chord.
Yeah.
So with this one, I mean, it has been quite nice to just plug in and go, everyone knows what they're doing, and just play it.
Just imagine being in Warsaw. I need a 6-year-old in a choir now.
Exactly.
But I remember you said, so previously the Blue Hour was a place of fly-tipped waste, weeds rusting against barbed wire, and famously dead badgers. And he said that was because we have to inhabit Suede World, and it's not a very nice place. Where is Suede World on this record? Just literally like a grungy basement.
Yeah, I suppose if it's anywhere geographically, physically, it's a rehearsal room.
Yeah.
It's a rehearsal room in Hackney, I suppose, if we want to kind of.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's it's a London rehearsal room, isn't it? To be honest, I didn't want to set it geographically anywhere. The Blue Hour was very specifically set in a kind of sort of slightly tatty, rural kind of setting. And I didn't want to set this anywhere, but I think it's become set somewhere. I wanted it to be more of a kind of emotional landscape. I think it has got that. Hopefully, has got that feel. So yeah, rehearsal room.
Yeah.
Rehearsal room, teenage bedroom.
Yeah.
Very small little kind of circuit.
But Suede World it's I always sort of like think of Suede World. I think it's like it's a field, and you're kind of like it's our job to try and sort of move the fence as far out as it can go. You can't just sort of jump over that fence and go to another field, because the other field over there is like hip hop. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We can't go there. Do you know what I mean? We've got to stay in our field, but you can kind of move the fences and move the posts around and kind of expand where Suede World is, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt we were doing with Blue Hour. We were kind of finding another place in Suede World. And this is possibly a more familiar part of Suede World, but it's still, I kind of wouldn't have done it unless there was a sort of freshness. And there's a way of, if you look at the sort of, it's a rock album, but it's not, it feels like a different sort of rock album to me. It has a kind of a wiriness that I don't think we've ever had before. A sort of punky, post-punky thing that we've never really mined before,
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, because the word punk's been used a lot around this record. Is that just in terms of an intimacy, or what does punk mean in the context of this album?
It was a kind of the first thing I said about the record, and I said it's our punk record. I didn't say it was a punk record, and that's quite an important point that I kind of keep having to clarify, because it's not a kind of like attempt at aping a genre, because that would be utterly pointless. The genre's been done. But I think it is interesting when bands sort of like take a genre, take the spirit of a genre, and sort of put it through the filter of themselves. So it's almost like a Suede's version of a punk record. So it's not a punk record. Still, it's never going to be a punk record. It's got kind of a couple of ballads on it, stuff like that. It's still definitely a Suede record, but it's kind of got that spirit, that sort of like that energy, that sort of, hopefully that joie de vivre, and that kind of like that sort of simplicity and that kind of messiness, hopefully. So in that sense, it's a punk record, I think. I think if you want to be technical about it, it's probably more of a post-punk record, but that's sort of, by design.
Doesn't sound as good, does it?
No, not really.
Black Ice especially. I underlined Black Ice 6 times in my notes.
I love
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's one of my favourites, so I always go back to that.
That's going to go off.
Yeah, it's good, that, yeah. I love the bass.
And that's got that kind of, kind of, someone like The Fall, who I think we all love, everyone in the band loves, but I don't think you've really heard it in Suede at all.
No.
You know what I mean? It's like occasionally on the B-side or something. And I think we were just a bit more straightforward about it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's kind of, rather than take it through all these kind of like byways, it's kind of try and get the spirit of those Fall records.
Yeah.
Ramshackle and kind of like quite leery, you know what I mean? That kind of feel to it.
So what can you tell us about those conversations you would have had with Ed Buller quite early on? Because obviously Suede never go down the same path twice, but there was something you were trying to recapture.
Yeah, I mean, Ed's been sort of wanting to make a really sort of punky, garagey record with us for a while, actually. In fact, he suggested we do that on Blue Hour, and it didn't feel right at the time. So he's really ready for it. The conversations with Ed, how do you kind of characterise them? Ed is, I love him to death. He's like, the reason we always end up working with him is it's like having your kind of older brother in the room or something. It's that much like a member of your family, where there's utterly brutal but honest conversations going on about the songs, and he'll come along. We'll kind of write. We always spend ages writing. We're writing for 6 months or something. He'll come along and listen to what we've been written. That's a load of shit. I'm trying to hear that again. That's great. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, fucking hell, you know what I mean? That's no good. That's good, you know. So he's very sort of, and sometimes you need that kind of, I don't know, sometimes you need that perspective and that objectivity sort of thing, because you get lost in a forest of crap when you're kind of writing and kind of going up your own arse and stuff. And you need someone to sort of walk in and sort of like just say, no, that's good. Take you by the scruff of the neck sort of thing. And Ed's very good at doing that. He's very good at kind of inspiring bands and getting the best out of them. So those kind of conversations, brutal but honest conversations, you know.
And he knows what we were like when we started.
Yeah.
I think that was a really important thing. You know, he was there when we were playing kind of like Painted People and Moving and things like that really early on. So he knows when we say we want to make a scruffy rock record, he knows what that means to us, that it's not, you know, what that means, what kind of sounds and what kind of, you know, the kind of passion that it needs to have.
Yeah, keeping it authentic rather than
pulling
any kind of like midlife crisis.
Yeah, exactly.
Thing,
You know, he knows where we come from, really. That's the thing.
Yeah. And lyrically, so I remember the last record you said it started off as being written from the viewpoint of a child. This time, right after Cold Black Mornings and Afternoons with the Blinds Drawn, am I right in assuming that sort of the act of reanalyzing your life and presenting yourself in a different way had an impact on these lyrics? And
yeah, I think it did. It's supposed to. Well, it's kind of, they're supposed to be sort of songs about me and my kind of mental state, I suppose, my emotional state. You know, they're not sort of like, it's not a kind of conceptual record through someone else's eyes or whatever. They're supposed to be quite, honest is a horrible word, isn't it? It sounds so earnest. Okay, so the title Autofiction, the reason I liked it is because the more I thought about it, you know, autofiction is basically a mixture of memoir and fiction. And the more I thought about it, I thought it was a really neat title for a record, because in a sense, I think all art is that. All art sits on that spectrum, right? You got kind of like, on one end of the spectrum, let's say you got the word truth, and the other end of the spectrum, you've got the word fantasy. And all art there's no art that's 100% truth. There's no art that's 100% fantasy. Even Lord of the Rings it contains human truths. Do you know what I mean? It's not, and so every kind of song that's ever been written sits on that line somewhere. And I love that idea, because I think about all the songs I've written in the past, and there's always been a kind of core of truth where they come from, but you kind of, the way that you construct songs, there's inevitably an element of sort of like a fiction there, because you're kind of like, you're manipulating these things. You know what I mean? It's even if you're writing, say, a memoir and you think it's 100% truth, there's all these elements like what you decide to leave out. You're kind of you're carefully kind of like manicuring it and editing it, you know, and that's sort of something that just happens. And so I like that sense that it's fiction. It's not fiction. I wanted to kind of like get inside my head as a 54-year-old man. Not to sort of, I didn't want to make a rock record trying to be a 25-year-old man. Like, you know, like we've made sort of 3 of those, and I thought it was pointless. I wanted to sort of like try and be a kind of like an honest sort of snapshot of where my head's at, and you know, the kind of, and for it not to be necessarily a sort of a particularly cozy and kind of warm experience. I think there's a tendency for people to think that as you get older, as you age, that you become sort of safer. And I don't see life getting safer in lots of ways. In certain ways it does, because you have stability in certain aspects of your life, family, whatever, blah, 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 relationships, maybe, if you're lucky. But in other ways, there's sort of fear, there's paranoia, there's all of these things. You know, as you get older, as you plummet towards death, there's kind of like, you know, fear of dying. And fear of illness and all these sorts of things. So there's sort of like elements of insecurity and anxiety that I kind of wanted to bring out. Yeah. So yeah, that's the sort of background of the record.
And I suppose as a band as well, I mean, is it easier to be a band as 21-year-olds just, you know, going into battle saying this is who we are, than it is to be a band of 50-year-olds saying this is why we're still a band.
You've got to justify more, haven't you?
I think it's. I mean, it's much harder to find kind of like freshness when you're a band that's been going for a long time.
You have to look harder for it, don't you?
You think about the first record, and it's got the first ballad you ever wrote, the first proper love song you ever wrote. You know what I mean? Everything's brand new. And then after writing how many? 200 songs?
Plus, yeah.
It's so easy to kind of go, all right, we'll do that one and that one and that one and that one and that one. And then you have a little souvenir of the past. But to find something that's new and to find something that I think gets us into the rehearsal room excited, it gets harder and harder. You know what I mean? You write far more per album than you ever used to. And it's not that they're bad. I mean, I hear tens of these songs. I think, that's pretty good. But to make a record now, it has to be something new. It has to be something special. It has to kind of come at it from a way that it hasn't before.
Yeah.
So I think, that's kind of harder. But I think the other side of that is, you kind of know that you can do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think most bands go through periods when they're just kind of like, we can't do this. You know what I mean?
I think that every new album we make, I always think that it's an insurmountable obstacle.
But the answer, at least you've been through that
exactly
so many times. But the first time it happens is like, oh, maybe this is it. You know what I mean? Maybe we had 18 songs in us. And now that the first time it happens, the first time you fail as a band, it's kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Whereas, you get into your 50s and you just accept that failure happens all the time. You know what I mean?
It's part of life.
Yeah. That's amazing. You spoke about kind of ripping up the rule book after every era. I'm trying to become a new band. And there's certain bands you look at, like Radiohead, so that they basically split up the band after a record, then find a reason to get back together. And that's what they do on each process. But then, I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but you look at an artist like Nick Cave, and I've had this conversation with a few people, that Nick Cave seems to become more himself as time goes on. Like, you look at Birthday Party Nick Cave and you think, well, who the hell are you? And then he sort of has become himself. Do you feel as if you are becoming more Suede?
I don't know whether we are. I think the moments that I really enjoy are the moments when I hear something that I didn't really expect from us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a weird thing, but like being in a rehearsal room and playing a song for the first time, because suddenly you kind of hear it, and often, because it's 5 people, you know what I mean? It's not what anyone expected. You know what I mean? This thing comes in, you kind of, oh fuck, all right, I understand what that is. I don't think that we're kind of honing it down to this kind of like one single thing. No.
Yeah.
I think there's a few Suedes. That's the thing. It's kind of like, it's just the way the band is. There's a few kind of sort of musical kind of personas that we have, and it's not like we kind of, like I said, it's not like we're kind of interested in sort of like, making a reggae record or anything like that. But there's the sort of spiky Suede, and then there's a sort of lusher Suede, romantic kind of like torch song Suede, and then there's a sort of experimental Suede as well. And I think we've got there's probably those 3 are the main sorts of Suede, and we kind of bounce between those 3 points really. So
yeah.
I think and that's kind of quite nice having that sort of like scope, I think, and those things to play from.
Yeah. Well, not just introducing a record, but introducing what it sounds like is a new era. Why did you choose She Still Leads Me On as the intro to this new era?
I think it was
our favourite
song. Yeah, it's really simple.
We've been through all of these kind of games before with record companies and stuff. Like, do you release a slow burning thing, or do you do this and that? And you know what? We wrote I can remember hearing it. I'm sitting in my bedroom, hearing it, and just going, "That's the one." I'm going to rehearse it and everything, being like, "This is the one," yeah. And then when the record came out, and we had to choose a single. It was like, this is the one, yeah? It's just, especially because we'd been away for a long time, I wanted people to hear it because I loved hearing it.
We're just really proud of it, I think. Just thought it was a great song, and I don't know, it just had a kind of energy, and I don't know, there was a depth to it that I think really works. Lyrically, it's interesting song, I think, and musically there's a joyousness to it that kind of hopefully connects.
Yeah. So it's a letter to your mother.
Yeah, it's a kind of thing about my mum. I suppose it's a song about loss, but not about grief. It's a song about sort of that sense that when someone's gone, when someone dies, basically, they're in a sense they're still there for you. They're kind of they can still guide you through life. Their sort of spirit sounds like the wrong word, but they're kind of, they can still kind of guide you through life. So there's a song on the last album called Life is Golden, which I wrote for my son. So it's almost like a companion piece to that. So Life is Golden is from the parent to the child, and She Salutes Me On is from the child to the parent. And so there's a kind of, it's a companion, I suppose, to that. I'm slightly obsessed with family. That's my new kind of inspiration for writing. The relationships between family members and what that means to me. And I think you just got to look for those things in life, haven't you? I wouldn't want to be writing about the same. I wouldn't want to have the same impetuses that I had in the 1990s. I like that I'm writing about different things, and it's still about love and passion and all of those things if you boil it down, but it comes from a slightly different place.
What side of the record would you say that 15 Again shows us?
I think it's just a very simple song. It's like a kind of like, that sort of feeling that you get when you just feel a bit ageless and you feel young and bulletproof. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's just like kind of bouncing through life, and you wake up. There's days that you wake up and it's like, I could be any age now.
Yeah.
And it's like someone you make me feel so young. It's like that kind of thing. It's like a sort of version. It's the same, it's that sort of that theme that's been explored before, but it's kind of, hopefully it's got a bit of hopefully it sort of sounds a bit like what it's supposed to mean, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's a very simple idea for a song.
Yeah. And what do you guys like collectively listen to? Do you have any kind of shared tastes at this stage? Do you ever come to the rehearsal studio and recommend something to one another?
Yeah, we have lots of shared tastes. I mean, it's funny. Normally, when we're making a record, you don't listen to a lot of current stuff. You know what I mean? But I mean, there were lots of things we were listening to for that. Around this record, Public Image and people like that, and Susie and the Banshees and things like that. I think things that we all separately like that kind of felt had something to say to the record. And just in terms of the attitude of them.
I think there's lots of interesting new bands that are kind of doing, mining that thing, and people like Dry Cleaning, and I really like the new Fontaines DC record. It's that kind of that sort of hard edge, sort of like, kind of left field stuff that, I listen to quite a bit. Bands like Shame and, what are they called? Touch the Leather. Then.
Fat White Family.
Yeah, people like that, yeah. So I think there's an interesting sort of pockets of bands doing sort of like mining a similar sort of thing.
And in that spirit, I mean, so you were very aware that the last three records were a triptych in an era and there was an arc, and that this is the start of something new. Where do you imagine the next chapter of Suede heading? What's it going to look like?
I don't know. I mean, the next record we're kind of planning to write, and that we've already sort of started, is much more experimental. So I don't really know if there's a kind of an arc with this one. I mean, to be honest, I just like the word triptych. So
it's a good word.
It's a great word. So why not use it? But
but this is a whatever one panel of a triptych.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just a panel.
I'm not seeing it as kind of collections of albums. You just have to sort of do it one at a time, really. I think that was one of those things that, because we were talking about a new album, it's sort of like, and we had the kind of retrospective thing of having just made 2 albums, it sort of seemed to be neat. And it kind of was, I do think of those 3 records as together, especially Night Thoughts and Blue Hour. They seem very sort of bound together stylistically. But I don't know if it's, like I said, the next record I think will be very different from this one.
You talked about the pendulum swinging there. So we assume that from here on, the pendulum could just swing to extremes. So there's nothing to say we haven't heard Suede at their most experimental or Suede at their rawest yet.
Totally. I'd love to think that, that our most daring work is ahead of us. I think that's a really exciting prospect, that a band at our stage of our career, it hasn't just sort of settled for kind of like, running, going through the motions with it. I love making new records. It makes my heart beat faster. It's sort of like, it's what I kind of get up for in the morning. It's an amazing, exciting, really privileged thing to be able to do, actually, to be able to kind of spend your life creating music, and I'm so glad that we are in a position to do it. So I think you've got a responsibility. I think you've got a responsibility to the fan base and to the people listening to not sort of like step off the gas, to do something interesting, to always challenge them. And I think our fan base really want to be challenged, actually. I think we've got a kind of like a really kind of interesting sort of set of people that listen to us these days. Of course, there's going to be people that kind of like, you just know what we did in the 90s, and that's fine, because that's, it's like the festival crowds or whatever, it's fine. But the kind of like the people that actually follow what we're doing now, I think they expect that they want for us to do something a bit surprising. And that's what we try and do.
Have there been many instances where someone's come into the studio or the rehearsal space with something that was interesting to Suede and out there, but not right at the time, and you thought, oh, we'll come back to that. We'll make the jazz record in 2024.
Well, Neil's often kind of like coming up with stuff. I remember kind of him ages ago, kind of came up with this sort of electro dance thing, played it to me, and I'm like, yeah, that's brilliant, but it doesn't sound like us. I don't know how it can be us, sort of thing. Neil's probably the kind of, because he's a keyboard player, he's kind of like coming up with kind of like the oddest stuff in lots of ways, because that's just the nature of his instrument, and keyboard, there's a sort of versatility within that.
There is just this weird thing every now and then. It's almost like Suede is a separate person. That every now and then there's these kind of things, and you kind of go, yeah, it's really good, but it's not Suede.
Yeah.
Even if we all like it, it's like, yeah, it's like having some kind of vengeful god hanging over you at all times.
Yeah, Suede definitely has a kind of persona of its own that's sort of like separate from our personas as individuals. There's definitely a kind of a band persona that, I guess it's part of that kind of like thing needing to fit into Suede world. It's definitely needs to sort of like work within the confines of that world.
That field.
The field with the grubby fence.
Yeah. And the speed trance version of Suede is not even on the same.
That's
a lot.
At least 2 or 3 albums away. Yeah.
Excellent. But Suede, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.